Imagine you are lying on an operating table. Your chest is wide open, and your life depends entirely on the hands of the surgeon standing right above you. Now, ask yourself this. In that life or death moment, how do you want that surgeon to feel? Do you want him to feel the excruciating pain of the scalpel slicing through your skin? Do you want his heart to race with terror just like yours is racing? Do you want him to weep with sorrow for your family? The answer is no. If a surgeon truly empathized the way society teaches us to, feeling exactly what another person is feeling, his hands would shake, his breathing would falter, his judgment would be clouded by tears and panic. The result? The surgery fails. The patient dies. In the operating room, that cold detachment isn't cruelty. It is a necessary survival skill. It is the only way he can keep a cool head to save your life. But here is your problem. You aren't in an operating room, yet you are trying to perform psychological surgeries every single day without any protective gloves. Every time you scroll past a tragic news story and feel your chest tighten. Every time you listen to a friend vent about a broken marriage and feel exhausted as if you just got divorced. Every time you try to carry the weight of the world's pain on your shoulders because you believe that's what a good person does. You are letting the scalpel cut your own hands. You are letting the emotional toxicity of others seep directly into your nervous system. We call it empathy, and we celebrate it as a holy virtue. But neuroscience has a different name for it. They call it empathic distress. And if left unchecked, it doesn't just make you burnt out and depressed. Ironically, it makes you useless to the very people you want to help. Today, we are going to perform a deep dissection into the dark side of empathy. I'm going to show you why your brain is wired to avoid suffering and how to build a psychological defense mechanism so you can care deeply without ever being destroyed. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. Before we dive into how the brain handles this, we need to clear up a massive misunderstanding. Most people think empathy is a simple on-off switch. You either have it or you're heartless, but the reality is much more complex. Psychologists don't see empathy as a single emotion. They view it as a spectrum consisting of 3 distinct mechanisms. And the reason you feel burnt out is because you are using the wrong kind. The first type is cognitive empathy. This is the intellectual ability to understand someone else's perspective. It's like looking at a map and saying, I see where you were lost. You understand the pain, but you don't feel it. Hostage negotiators, spies, and ironically, even psychopaths are very good at this. They get you, but they remain cold. The second type, and this is the danger zone, is emotional empathy. This is when you see someone crying and your own throat tightens. You don't just understand they're sad, you absorb that sadness. This is emotional contagion. It is wonderful for bonding a mother and child or lovers. But when applied to deep trauma, it's like jumping into the water to save a drowning person, but instead of swimming, you let their panic drag you down with them. Here's the trap. Society teaches us that this second type is true empathy, that if you don't suffer with me, you don't care about me. But that is a lie. There is a third type, the one our surgeon uses, and our goal for today: compassionate empathy. Compassionate empathy isn't, I feel your pain. It is, I understand your pain, I care deeply about you, and because I am not drowning in that pain, I have the strength to pull you out. The difference between being destroyed and being a healer lies in this tiny shift from feeling with to feeling for. So why is this shift so hard? Why does our brain default to absorbing pain mode, only to later shut down completely as a defense mechanism, leaving us numb? To answer that, we have to look at what is actually happening inside your skull when you witness suffering. Let's start with what is happening inside your head right now. For decades, neuroscientists have identified a fascinating system called mirror neurons. When I lift a glass of water to drink, and you watch me do it, the neurons in your brain fire exactly as if you were lifting the glass yourself. This is the biological basis of connection, but it has a dark side. Neuroscientist Tanya Singer at the Max Planck Institute conducted groundbreaking research. She scanned the brains of people watching their loved ones receive mild electric shocks. The results were startling. The parts of the brain associated with the observer's own pain, specifically the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, lit up like a Christmas tree. What does this mean? It means that to your brain, the boundary between me and you is thinner than you think. When you practice emotional empathy, you aren't just imagining someone else's pain, you are literally running a simulation of that pain on your own biological hardware. You are renting out your nervous system to process someone else's trauma. And just like any electrical system, if you plug too many appliances into one outlet, the circuit breaker will trip. This brings us to the cruelest paradox of human psychology: scope insensitivity. Conventional logic says if one suffering person makes you sad, 2 people should make you twice as sad. And 1,000,000 people dying in a disaster should make you 1,000,000 times sadder. But the brain doesn't do linear math. It does circuit breaking. There's a famous experiment. When people are shown a photo of one starving little girl, donations are high. But when they are shown that same girl alongside statistics about millions of other starving people, donations actually drop by half. Why? Why do more victims lead to less care? Because one victim is a tragedy your brain can handle. You can connect, you can feel, you can act. But 1,000,000 victims isn't a tragedy, it's data. It's statistical overload. When faced with suffering on a massive scale, your emotional empathy system detects a threat of annihilation. If it allowed you to feel the pain of 1,000,000 people, your nervous system would collapse instantly. So it does the only thing it can to protect you. It shuts down completely. This phenomenon is called the collapse of compassion, or psychic numbing. This is why you can scroll past news of a devastating war with a blank face, yet fly into a rage because the delivery guy spilled your coffee. It's not because you're a bad person. It's because your defense mechanism has slammed the door on emotional tsunamis, leaving only cracks for petty annoyances to slip through. But what is the cost of this numbness? When you constantly trigger this circuit breaker, you don't just block out pain, you block out connection. You become distant from your spouse, impatient with your kids, and hollow inside. You are safe, but you are solitary within your own fortress. So how do we break this paradox? How do we keep our hearts open without letting them be destroyed? We need a new blueprint. So how do we put on those surgical gloves? How do we care without burning out? I call this the surgical empathy protocol. It consists of 3 protective layers you must build. Layer 1, cognitive reframing, from a sponge to a screen. Most highly sensitive people live like a sponge. You walk into a room and you soak up every emotion there. Someone is sad, you are drenched in sadness. Someone is angry, you are soaked in anger. You need to become a screen. A movie screen displays images in ultra-high definition. It shows you the pain, the tragedy, and the tears with absolute clarity. But, and this is the most important part, the screen itself never gets wet. It displays the information, but it doesn't store the emotion. The next time you hear a heartbreaking story, repeat this mantra in your head. I am observing this pain, but this pain is not mine. Layer 2. Nervous system regulation, the biological reset. Sometimes logic isn't enough. When your heart is racing and cortisol is pumping through your veins because of someone else's drama, you can't think your way out of it. You have to use your body. We need to activate the vagus nerve, the brake of the nervous system. The fastest technique is the physiological sigh. Inhale twice quickly through your nose and exhale long and slow through your mouth. Do this 3 times. It immediately signals to your primitive brain the threat is over, you are safe. Don't try to help anyone when your heart rate is over 100. Reset yourself first. Layer 3, shift to action, escaping the pain matrix. This is the final secret of neuroscience. When you are stuck in emotional empathy, you are stuck in the pain matrix. But the moment you ask yourself, what is one small action I can do to help them right now? Even if it's just pouring a glass of water or listening intently, your brain switches channels. It shifts from the pain processing area to the reward system and the motor cortex. Why don't doctors and first responders get mass depression even though they see tragedy every day? Because they're acting. Action is the antidote to helplessness. When you focus on the solution, you no longer have the energy to focus on the suffering. Don't sit there and feel terrible with them. Stand up and do something for them. That is true compassion.
Finally, I want to leave you with this thought. We're often taught that the measure of kindness is how much we suffer for others, that if you aren't exhausted, you haven't loved enough. That is a dangerous lie. The world doesn't need more exhausted martyrs. The world doesn't need more kind-hearted people who are bedridden with depression. The world needs people who are capable of action, people with cool heads and warm hearts, people who know how to protect their flame so it can warm others through the long winter, instead of letting it burn them alive in a single night. Protecting your mental health isn't selfishness. It is the prerequisite for helping anyone. So, put on those gloves, keep your hands steady, and start healing the world like a professional, not a victim. I'm Hostname, and this is Psych Blueprint. If this video helped you drop that invisible burden, hit like and subscribe to build a stronger mind every week. And let me know in the comments, do you feel more like a sponge or a screen? I'd love to hear your story. See you in the next Blueprint.